Imagine moving into your dream home. Clean linens in the closet, sunlight cutting across the floorboards, the smell of fresh paint and possibility in every room, only to realize someone's been siphoning away not your time, not your Wi-Fi, but your damn water. That first week, the house felt like a promise. I'd bought it cheap, family friends who'd fled the country and needed cash fast. The place was a fixer-upper, sure half, renovated, dusty, a rusty padlock where a proper lock should be. But it was mine. I moved in with my 3 dogs, and it should have been the start of something good. Day 1 the garage already had someone else's motorbike in it. I remember standing in the doorway, keys heavy in my hand, watching a stranger's bike sitting where my car should go. No note, no apology, just a bike. I dragged it out onto the street because the idea of my own garage being occupied by a stranger felt like a slap. Later that evening, when I was finally home and had a gate installed, I heard the pounding. Metal on metal, a voice barking that it was his bike, that I had no right to move it. I watched through the curtain as a gray-haired man beat on my nute until his arm ached and the sun went down, then stomped off when no one answered. He was angry, red-faced, muttering the kind of curses that felt rehearsed. That should have been my warning. I didn't listen to it the way I should have. I'm stubborn like that. The neighborhood was sketchy, people treated that abandoned-looking house like a free resource. Cars pulled up and left, neighbors assumed vacancy. It wasn't until that shower, one of those hot, freedom-making showers after a long day of moving boxes, that I noticed the water thread down to a sad trickle. I let the soap suds gather and then reached out, prodding at the shower head like it might be shy. The pressure hissed. Barely a stream. Then I heard it, a faint mechanical drone from next door. The hum of a water pump. I froze, and a small, ridiculous hope flickered. Maybe the municipal supply was acting up. Then the neighbor's pump cut off, and my shower roared back to life, full and satisfying. It was like watching a light switch in someone else's house control my hot water. I started testing it. Turned on the kitchen tap. Walked outside and listened. His pump whirred, mine flinched. His pump stopped, my pressure surged. I did this ritual 3 times, like a mad scientist repeating an experiment to be sure it wasn't a fluke. Each time it matched perfectly. A pattern emerged. One that made the hair on my arms stand up. They'd told me the previous owners had been complaining about high water bills, while the house sat empty for years. The explanation had been pipe leaks, faulty meters, the usual excuses people give when they don't want to admit someone else has been using what's theirs. That made me angrier than the money did. Water where I'm from is cheap, the bill was never going to ruin anyone. It was the principle, the audacity, the idea that this man, an old, sour-faced neighbor who'd already shouted at me about a bike, thought he could waltz onto what he assumed was an abandoned property, and feed his tenants from my supply as if he'd done me a favor. I watched him sometimes from my windows. He was a small, stooped figure who seemed resent everything, the sale of the house, the sight of my dogs, the idea that things could change. There was entitlement in the way he stood, chin jutting, like the world owed him a favor. He'd argued with the previous owners, complained that the neighborhood had been altered by the sale. They'd warned me, but warnings for me are like traffic signs. They're suggestions until proven otherwise. Honestly, I thought no way would an old man interfere with my bills. I was 6 foot built, with dogs that could sniff out trouble. Confrontation seemed unnecessary. I was wrong about that too. The debate in my head bloomed like a nasty weed. Confront him and risk a denial. He'd lie, stomp, shame me. He had a venom for that. Call the police and get stuck in a bureaucracy that moves slower than molasses. And for what? A few dollars. Or let it lie and live with someone else's hand in my pipes. I found myself waking at 3 a.m., because the thought rattled me. I'd lie there, hearing the night sounds. Crickets, distant horns, and imagine the neighbor hunched over a pump, filling tanks for people who weren't paying for it. I imagined him patting himself on the back while I paid for his showers. It made my stomach twist. It wasn't about the cash. It was about the violation. You understand that feeling? Like someone took a photograph of your private life and hung it on a public billboard. The theft was personal. So I let the dislike harden into resolve. Not a flaming, blind rage, but a cold, precise one. I don't do well with injustice, especially the kind that's petty and smug. I sat at my kitchen table, the 3 dogs sprawling at my feet, and I watched my water bill like it was a map leading me to what to do next. The plan I came up with was simple, elegant, legal, crueler in its efficiency than anything violent or illegal could have been. I wasn't going to step onto his property. I wasn't going to cut his wires or make threats. I would just remove the one thing he'd been mooching on. My supply. I'd shut off the source. I knew how pumps behave. When a rooftop tank needs water, the float valve tells the pump to run. If the tank level doesn't rise, the pump keeps running and running. Hungry, grinding, burning if it has to. That constant draw can overheat motors, damage the pump, roast wiring if the house is patched together with relics from the 90s. Old houses, old wiring, old assumptions. This man had it all. I pictured his pump whining and wearing, cursing itself into ruin. I smiled a little at the thought, feeling the warmth of someone finally getting their bill for freeloading. That Monday night, I stood at my water main like a sentry. The street was a ribbon of quiet houses, small lights smudged across the darkness, crickets murmured. Inside me, quiet, steady, I had no malice in my muscles, just the calm of someone who had made a decision and saw no need to be impulsive about it. I waited until the neighbor's pump started its mechanical breathing. Soft at first, a little noisy through the thin walls of darkness. And then I turned the main valve. The world on my side went gentle, and then immediate. The pipes tightened, the hum cut, the pressure dropped. I walked back to my porch, feet on concrete, the 3 dogs circling at my knees, and listened. Hours passed. Midnight melted into 2. That pump kept on. The sound across the wall became a frantic whine, then a grinding that wasn't just motor. Something like a machine being forced to do what it was never designed for. At 3 in the morning, there was a sound like a gunshot in the hush of the neighborhood, a pop, a short, clean burst, and then a deeper silence. I stood up so fast my chair scraped tile. Lights went out next door, not a slow fade, gone like a swallowed breath. Then voices, muffled and angry, feet on stairs. I watched the house across the fence through the slit of my curtains, and saw small, frantic illumination phones, flashlights, the jitter of people moving. Windows opened and faces peered out. Tenants shouting, a shout that carried the sharpness of betrayal and confusion. It was delicious, in the sense that injustice finally meets consequence. Morning brought more noise. The small house filled with tension. I heard the clatter of arguments and watched neighbors go from curious to sympathetic to outraged in the course of a day. In my country, water and electricity are classified as essential services. Landlords must provide them. It's the law. When someone fails, the law lands not on the tenant but on the owner. Tenants lodged complaints. The fines weren't pocket change. 500 slapped on a retired man with no other income as an earthquake. He had to return security deposits, pay penalties, and somehow make the wiring safe again. He tried patching the fuse box, replacing the pump himself with a stubborn, proud fury that looked like denial. The house smelled of burnt plastic and frustration. I didn't celebrate in parades. I don't need fireworks to know a job's done. But I did sit on my porch, sipping coffee as the sun warmed the roof tiles, dogs at my side. I watched the man's house slowly empty. Tenants moved out, grumbling about lack of basic amenities and the cost of being inconvenienced. One left within 2 days. The second followed in quick succession. Each departure peeled away the only income that kept him afloat. The fines stacked like a debt he hadn't prepared for. A retired mechanic with no pension beyond the rent checks he got. Suddenly he had deadlines and angry bureaucrats and neighbors who'd watch him like vultures. By the end of that week he was packing boxes, a couple of chairs, some rusted tool, a mattress, shuffled out the door as he muttered arrangements with his daughter. Pride does strange things to people. He had this stagger in his shoulders like someone who'd been robbed of dignity more than of dollars. I watched him load the last cardboard carton into a trunk and felt an odd, chilly satisfaction. Not joy for someone's ruin. More like the closure of a wound that had been infecting the neighborhood for years. 2 days after the eviction and the complaints, he walked up to my gate. It was the first time he'd spoken to me since the bike incident. Up close, he looked smaller than the window had led me to believe. There were fine lines carved around his eyes like someone who'd been worried for decades. He asked, voice edged with something that wanted to be casual, but couldn't hide the tremor, "Did you turn off your water?" He tried to sound like it could be any cause. A plumber, an accident of life. I gave the answer that would have been the worst sort of blow for his pride. The kind that made his chest deflate. Oh yeah. My plumber found a leak, had to shut it off until the next day. Neutral. Soft. The kind of answer that doesn't add insult but makes it known you control what you can. He blinked, his jaw moved in a small, angry twitch, and then he walked away. I saw the confession pass through his eyes like a flash. Maybe he knew I knew. Maybe he didn't, it didn't matter. For once, his hands were empty. I didn't break any laws. I didn't kick down his door. I simply removed what he took for granted access. He'd exploited a house that had been left open, assumed it would always be that way, and paid for the arrogance of that assumption. 2 birds. 1 valve. It feels a little petty to call it justice, but petty has a clean edge. Sometimes cleaner than courtroom verdicts and years of legal fees. Sometimes revenge isn't fireworks and cinematic explosions. Sometimes it's the quiet, surgical removal of a lifeline, and the patience to watch cosmetic effect. He thought he was entitled to free water because no one had said otherwise for years. In the final accounting, his entitlement drowned him fines, lost tenants, reputation shredded, a forced move to his daughter's cramped apartment. Not a dramatic fall from a skyscraper, just the slow collapse of everything that sustained him. If this story chills you, if it scratches that part of you that hates being taken advantage of, then good. That's exactly what it was meant to do. Tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying neighbor revenge you've seen or pulled off yourself? And if you liked the way this one played out, hit subscribe, because I've got more stories where patience and precision do the heavy lifting for justice. Because sometimes, the quietest moves are the most devastating, and Ethan Ward doesn't get stolen from. Not once. Not ever.